Nico. And I'm super excited for you to come and share your story with us and with the viewers. First off, I would like to say just thank everyone for tuning in and watching. We are talking about sexual assault survivors. Whether you have been sexually assaulted as a child, incest, fondling, human trafficking, attempted rape, raped, sexually assaulted, or sibling sexual assault or abuse, as we say. This is really, really tough because it's so many of us who suffer from this on a daily basis and have nobody to talk to. So I just wanted to say that's why I started this platform. And again, Nico, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart coming on and wanting to share some of your story. And Kanisha, thank you for being here to listen and ask questions to some things that you're not you don't quite understand. Or if there's questions you need to know, answers that we both can probably help you with and make you understand a lot better than you do. So we can start now with Nico by introducing, yourself and telling us about yourself.
Well, hi, my name is Nico. I'm 49 years old, and the first time I was molested was between the age of 4 and 5. Um, I've also was molested around the 6th grade, and I was raped when I was a freshman in high school, and I was in between the younger years of growing up. I was molested by my grandfather.
So how did you deal with all this growing up from a young child to your adult self as of now?
Um, One of the things I dealt with was I was a pyromaniac. If it was flammable, I would light it up. Another way I dealt with it was, and I didn't realize at the time, writing. I had to learn to understand the difference between if I was having sex because I wanted to, or if I was having sex because it was to please them. I had to also start understanding myself and my body and realizing that what I actually liked as a person and as a woman and what and how to say no.
Right.
When at one part of your mind it's you really would like this person in your life and you quote unquote will do anything for them. But when it's affecting you in certain ways where you're like, I don't like the way this feels, I don't like the way he touches me or anything, it, you start maturing and you start understanding that um, you don't have to, period. And also just understanding that everybody's not for you, not everybody um, is for your body. You learn about what it means as vibing, as people say, that connection. You learn about intimacy. Intimacy is not always sexual, but in some people's mind, they think that is what it has to be.
Right.
Not everybody understands about the difference between sex and love making. So it was a lot to have to learn, and it was a lot to had to for me to understand, you know, what were my different relationships about. but I also became very cautious, and I can sometimes pick up or suspect when somebody's being molested or has been.
Okay.
So it's a lot. Even now, you know, listening and reading other people's stories, and sometimes you're just out in public and you can see the way that people react when they're near certain people, and you kind of pick
Mhm.
up a lot of things, especially if you've been a victim.
So let me ask you this, Nico. When you were 5 years old, right? It was 5.
Hmm.
When this started happening to you at 5, because I was 5 as well, what did you understand or you didn't understand? Like how were you and how was your behavior trying to grasp and understand what was happening at that particular time, being so young?
5-year-old, he was a police officer, so you learn about being protected, and I think he used that. Um, he never did. I remember he never did anything sexual to me. He
Mm-hmm.
just taught me about kissing. Um, I'll never forget him taking me to Lloyd's, the children's store downtown, and I'll never forget the dress that he bought me. And I mean, I remember exactly what it looks like, and I remember him showing me how to kiss. So it was like an innocence because I didn't know it was anything wrong. I didn't know he was doing something wrong to me. I didn't know that what was happening to me was wrong.
Mm.
So at that time, I didn't know.
Right.
So when you came out and told your mom or your family that this has been happening to you when you're younger, how did that play out?
Well, well, my mom didn't find out until I was an adult.
Mm.
Um, Other people who knew were people that were my age, because some of the people around my age were going through the same thing or had gone through the same thing. So we had our own little, I guess, love support group.
Right.
We didn't really talk to our family members about it or anything. It was we kind of consoled each other. The only reason why I came out, and my mother found out, was because the police officer came back into our lives later on. She started dating him again, and um, I was pregnant with my son, and I was with my first husband at the time. So um, he was uncomfortable. It's being recorded. Um, he was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. I'm sorry. When he was, my mom started dating him, and my mom's telling me, and my ex-husband could see the um, how uncomfortable I was
Mm.
when she said that. Of course, in his mind, he's thinking, "Oh, you just don't like him." But when I've actually talked to him and told him the situation, he goes, "Okay, now I understand."
Right.
Um, then what happened was, one day my mom called me and asked me, could they come over? And the only reason why I was okay with it was because my husband was there, one, and two, I'm an adult. He can't hurt me anymore.
Hmm.
But when my mom and I are having a conversation on the phone, and she's like, "Yeah, he said he feels real comfortable around you." That sent something through me.
Right.
So it
So
triggered you. It was a
yeah,
trigger.
so that's where my ex-husband was like, "You need to tell her. This is where you need to finally tell her." So I
Mhm.
had to tell her. I just went on ahead and told her everything. I told her about him. I told her about my grandfather. I told her about her other ex-boyfriend. I still never really told her about the rape, because the rape, it happened. It wasn't I don't know. I don't know if it was because we were so knee deep in a conversation about my grandfather, because this is her father.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always this thing about, because he and I are about the same complexion, but he really, really was not into his dark skinned grandkids. He had a problem with the dark skinned guys my mother dated and stuff like that. So, it was always set in my mind, because it kind of felt like slavery, where I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good enough to be his grandchild, but I was good enough to be his whore.
How
You
common,
know,
how
yeah.
common.
Like I couldn't be the house nigga,
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it was a lot to tell my mom. I told my dad, and my dad was definitely upset, because he's like, I wasn't here to protect you. I
Mm-hmm.
get it. I'm not mad at my father, you know. My dad lived in Houston, Texas. How would he know unless I would have had to call him and say, Dad, this is what's going on with me,
Right.
you know.
Right, right.
Um, but I just, the family members I had around me, there was, to me, in my opinion, as a child, when you um when you know your family, you know who you can go to for certain things, be
Right.
it good, be it bad, or whatever. I didn't really feel like there was anybody in my family who I can go to and tell them, this is my situation, this is what's going on. And then how do you tell that? You know?
Exactly.
So, you know.
So did you ever receive any counseling or therapy
Yeah,
growing up? Well, as you got older and you told your story.
I did, when I was going through my divorce. Um, I sought out help, because it was a bad divorce. It was a really, really bad divorce. Um, and I went to I asked one of my coworkers was telling me about a woman that she was seeing. And I just asked her one day, I was like, can I have her information? And so when I went to her, the first thing she said to me was, why are you here? And I said, I thought it would be better if I came to you now than to be either in jail because I killed him, or be in a grave because I killed myself.
Right.
And of course, when you sit with a counselor, social worker, whatever, it, it doesn't just, the discussion is not just about one thing. Everything comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talked about that. We talked about, how I cope with it, how I deal with it with other people. Um, it was a big help. Knowing that I did have people that were around my age that was going through the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
because we were able to lean on each other. She said that was definitely a big help for all of us. It
Right.
doesn't help everybody that way, because some people, they go through those depressions, and they become addicts and stuff like that. And that I know of, the people who I was around, we dealt with it. We learned how.
That's
So
great.
yeah, so like when all that happened, like with your family, your grandfather, all that, did you forgive, like, to get through all this?
I had to, because if I didn't forgive, I might not be able to function, at
Right.
least not well. People might think was functioning, but it wouldn't have meant that I actually was.
Mm-hmm.
The day that my grandfather died, I actually went to the hospital, and I looked at, he was dead, but I looked at him and I told him, I said, no, I did not. I'll never forget. I said, but I do forgive you. Because the
Mm-hmm.
one thing my mom asked me when I finally told her what happened, she said, well, what do you want to do about your grandfather? I said, there's nothing to do. He's old, and there's nothing, he can't hurt me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and let him live out his life. I just hope that none of my other family members were affected. I believe there's a possibility that they were,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have proof.
Right.
And
Wow.
everybody's not as comfortable coming out and telling these horrific stories, what has happened to them, whether they, when they were children or adults. In our community, in all communities, it's like a taboo. No one wants to discuss this. You're told to not say anything when you do tell, when they do find out, or what goes on in the house stays in the house. I know we're all familiar with that. You
Yeah.
don't discuss anything that goes on in this house with no one. So that's the taboo of it all. And and it's still going on today.
Mhm.
So that's why we need this platform, because we need for people to be able to call in. And by the way, the sexual abuse hotline would be 1-800-656-4673. Again, sexual abuse hotline, 1-800-656-4673. Kanisha, how do you feel about everything you've heard so far?
Um, it breaks my heart that you guys went through that. I can never say um, I really know what you're going through or went through, because that never happened to me. Um, but that would have messed me up. It really would have messed me up. And being a child, how can an adult do that to a child? How can an adult do that to anybody but a child? That's sick. And for a lot of people that come out and say what happened, their family don't believe it. And that
Right,
hurts also.
right.
Yeah.
I talked with a licensed uh, professional by the name of Brad Watts, and he was awesome, and he simply uh, deals with sibling sexual abuse, and that is really, really common. He actually has a book, and I'm at I'm towards the end. It's an awesome book, but it happens more often than what we'll ever know. It's a pandemic, right? Like when I spoke with him, I was telling him, it's like a pandemic. And he told me, I have a book, and I call it The Silent Pandemic, that's been going on for so many years. So, it's so much abuse that goes on. It's just not the sibling sexual abuse. It's all sorts of abuse, as I had stated earlier on in this podcast. But it's really time for people like me and Nico to take a stand, tell our stories, and maybe prayerfully, uh, other people will want to tell theirs as well.
Can I ask y'all something? Y'all both are parents.
Right.
How did you protect your children from, I know you were probably scared that something might happen to them. So were you like overbearing of the children when they were like around different people that you may have known that mess with you or something? Um, how did you feel?
Mm, I'm gonna go real quick first, Nico, and I'll let you finish off with this. For me, mentally, this was a challenge for me. And even times today, it's a challenge, because me being molested, it wasn't just molested, it was like molested, rape, sometimes choked, so beat. It was it was really bad, because it went on from 5 to 8 years old, right? So as a parent, knowing what I went through, because I went through it for trying to protect another sibling. After a while, I knew he was done with me and he wanted my other sibling. So it was like, take me, so she wouldn't get the abuse.
Mhm.
So having my daughter, getting pregnant with her, in college, um, I most definitely, that I can say today, I went overboard. I was so protective. I never allowed her to really communicate or get too comfortable with any man other than her father for the first 3 years. Um, all the way up until my kids were grown. Um, they haven't been around but two men in their lives. Other than my oldest is father, she's been around, and then my ex. Um, but I overdid it. I was very difficult and hard to where I can openly say, because I'm big on owning my truth, I can say that I have made some bad choices along the way, because mentally, all I wanted to do was protect my daughters, and I overdid it. So with me owning my truth and what I had gone through, I overdid it as far as wanting to protect them under any means necessary. And when you do that, you somehow, for me, what I did was, it was a sense of, I'm not going to say imprisonment or jail. It was almost like my kids knew, like, don't. I give them a look like, don't even talk to them. Like if someone spoke to them, my oldest, she was 7 years old when I had my second child. She knew not to talk to men. She had to have my approval. Um, if a man talked to her, she stayed very close to me. So mentally, I think that I had a lot to do with problems with my daughters today. And I own that openly and publicly, because that was the mentalness I suffered. I overdid it with my two daughters. So, it's something, it's a work in progress, but I've accepted it, asked for forgiveness, and I move on. You never get over this. I was brutally molested, and I would go months without being molested, but then I'd get molested, and it was brutal. So, mentally, I've accepted what I go through. I have triggers, but my kids suffer, but I have an open discussion with them, and they understand, but they have suffered along with me for years.
Right.
So Nico, I'll let you take the floor.
I never told my daughter that I was molested. Um, but a man that was close to us knew, and knew every aspect of what I went through. And he used it against me.
Mm,
And by hurting my daughter. And I couldn't prove it. And I knew. And I kept saying that I know something's wrong.
Right.
And how it all came out was because my daughter, who was real close to a lot of her classmates, they were in school one day having a conversation, and she told them what was going on with her. And they took her by the hand, grabbed her by her arm, and they took her in the principal's office and said, "You have to tell him."
Mhm.
When I came home from work, and she said, "Mom, I got something to tell you." And she was so scared to tell me that she wrote it down. So when I looked at it and I read it, I told her whatever decision she makes, if she wants to press charges or whatever, I was going to support her, because in my heart I knew.
Mhm.
And so we had to go to the FBI, the Detectives Bureau on the North Side, and she had to tell them everything. And then she had to get multiple interviews, because of course they need to make sure that what she was telling was the truth.
Right.
So between us going to the office, they would come over to the house and
Mhm.
talk to her. And they finally pressed charges on that person. They did a preliminary hearing, and his family, like every time she would move to one seat, they would all move and follow her like they were trying to intimidate her.
Mhm.
And they had told me from the door about this man's lawyer and said, "He's a motherfucker." And that's exactly how they said it.
Mhm.
And they said, "I'm telling you ahead of time." And they said, and they looked at my daughter and they said, "This is what I want you to do." Said, "We are standing right beside you. If you get scared, if you have any questions," they was like, "You just look right at us."
Mhm.
So when they got in front of the judge, and they must have purposely waited until everybody, like most of their cases was out, so that she didn't have to try to tell her story in front of all these people.
Right.
And they was not lying. The lawyer that this man had was obnoxious. And my child was 16 years old.
Mhm.
And they're talking to this girl like she was a grown woman.
Right.
And they were talking to her like they wanted details of what happened. And they
Mhm.
talked to her in those details, in those words. "This is what he did to you. This is what that. Did he do this? How did he do it? Did he put your leg here?" Like it was like a bad porn.
Right.
It was a bad
Wow.
porn. And I can't, to this day, I cannot remember what that man said to my daughter. She turned and looked at them ladies that was with Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. She turned and looked at them women, and you could see it in her face, like, "I'm going to punch him." And
Mhm.
they grabbed her hand. She turned around and answered the question that was asked to her. And the judge said, "We're going to court." 2 years. We kept going to court. They kept canceling. We never made it into court. The one day she didn't show up, they dropped all the charges. The one day she didn't show up. Because in her mind, if they didn't care, why should she?
Mhm.
Wow.
So I feel like I didn't protect her enough, but at the same time, I don't think that no matter how much I would have tried to protect her, there was always that possibility that something could have happened to her.
Right.
Because if it wouldn't have been somebody that was close to us, she could have been in school. She could have
Mhm.
been at her job. It could have been anywhere. It could have been anybody. And I always felt like at times she was angry with me because she felt like I didn't protect her enough, or she's angry with me because she thought I was angry with her because she didn't show up that day for court. And I was never mad at her. I understood.
Right.
You know, she keeps going. We keep, you know, I'm taking days off for work and all this, and we're sitting in, and all of a sudden it's canceled. Or we get a phone call, they had to reschedule it, or something else happened, we had to reschedule. Like there was always something. So I never ever thought that this would happen to my child, because I always wanted to be that one, like people talk about uh breaking generational curses. And I
Right.
wanted to be one of those people to break generational curses. And I swear it seems like not just with you know being molested, but just a lot of things where no matter how hard I try, I can't get there to do that. I can't get to
Right.
that point because it might be the decisions that I made, or there's a spirit that keeps jumping in, going, "Nah, you still got to deal with what you got to do."
Well, guess what? You do not. You did the best you could with what you knew how. You can't blame yourself.
Well, the sad thing about it is after all of that, the man who we trusted sued us for defamation of character. And if you type my daughter's name in right now, you can see the whole thing.
Well, there's some good news I'll share with you about this. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
There's some good news. I touched base with an attorney by the name of Laura Loughlin, Esquire. I found her on IG, and I'm going to set up a meeting with her. It's called the Amicus Committee, and I think I'm pronouncing it. They are now reopening cases that passed the statute of limitations.